One would like to say there is no plan, but I'm afraid there is. Yes, Liz.
Just a quick question. I guess also with regards to Kirli's talk I thought it was really interesting how you said that you felt that you were industrially engineered by the government. Mm-hmm. And that with regards to Kirli's talk that the Aboriginal people in Griffith felt that their place, the place that they associated with was on the reserved land. But that is an industrially or a government generated ideal. That isn't Aboriginal land specifically. I mean, all of it we would consider to be Aboriginal land, but to suddenly identify with only such a very small, limited space. And the same could be said for Redfern as well. You know, that it's Redfern because that's where the government has put you. So, I mean, if you've been kind of put someplace else, would you feel that same sense of place? Or is it something to do specifically with Redfern?
Well, I think humans are creatures of habit, eh? We've been living in these places a long time. And we apparently, are now Australian citizens. We're no longer on the Flora and Fauna Act. And it would be considered all politically incorrect to keep shifting our people once they have made it their home, and especially after being so traumatised by past policies. So what's happened in Redfern is if you have all these people, some of the people who actually squatted to create the block were ex-servicemen who came back from the war, and they had nowhere to go to, and they had, not the same rights as other ex-servicemen, and ended up just squatting, to keep themselves warm, to keep themselves sheltered.
That was something that came out during the recent Anzac Day celebrations, was that even lack of basic medical services to Aboriginal ex-servicemen. It's quite extraordinary, and there's no doubt that we're all the way to go. I think certainly if there are more questions we can do those, but I'd also like to say that it's incredibly important that you're here today and that whether we do participate more. It's one of those things that every time we have a discussion about these things, and it's also about multiculturalism and immigration and all sorts of things, we talk about the Anglo-Celtic background and all the rest of it. There is no doubt, as I'm standing here today, that I am an Anglo-Celtic girl. You only need to look at the freckles and know that I'm from mainly Scottish descent. And we look at the people who founded the National Trust, and we look at the majority of our membership and whatever, and that's who we are. And that is certainly a strong part of our pride and our sense of place and all of those things. But that sense of pride must also be, we must be, I suppose, aware of everything that is around us. And we can't, what really I'm trying to say here other than that I personally struggle with what is the appropriate reaction to certain things, particularly when I see things happen in Redfern. I have a particular friend who works a lot in Redfern, and I hear a lot of things that go on. And I am personally absolutely horrified that this is 2007 and these things are happening. I feel absolutely just completely angry. And then I think to myself, well, what am I supposed to do about it? Because, on one level, it is very easy to be, as is often the case with institutions like the Trust, and I think there have been many around the world who are sort of well-meaning, and as Aletha's pointed out, they tend to be the academics and the people who know about policies and whatever, who come and sort of philosophize and direct what they think should happen. But it seems to me that we all have to allow the grassroots to grow, I suppose. And that's not only with the Aboriginal population, but it is also to do with immigrants coming in. And it's interesting what Kirli was saying about the Muslims, for example. Again, it's something I know nothing about. I mean, my main knowledge of any Islamic cultures is either to do with architectural history, I'm an architect, or to do with what I see happening in Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that. And so the reality of that faith in this country is something I really don't know much about at all. But it seems that just going back to my earlier point about self-determination and self-pride, is that we all must be, I think I'm sort of beginning to sound like a preacher here, and I don't want to do that. I get on my soapbox, but it's got to be a fundamental that we all are masters or mistresses, whatever, of our own future and our own identity. And you're right, it's not a matter of waiting for someone to tell you that it's okay. And it's the same battle. I mean, just about women going to clubs, which we talked about earlier, or the women in the vote as well. Also having Aboriginal people acknowledged on the census. I mean, it's extraordinary. I guess governed by the Flora and Fauna Act. I mean, my God.
I believe my mother was 12 at the time.
12.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this is beyond belief. And a lot of that is allowed to happen though, because of ignorance. I mean, as I was saying earlier when I was doing the acknowledgement, is that it's only been in incredibly recent times that we have even acknowledged, even in a formulated way, that we are on Aboriginal land. And I'm one of those people who grew up on the North Shore of Sydney, and I probably saw 2 Aboriginal people in my entire life, for my entire teenage years. And that's not because for any other reason than they just weren't there, or I wasn't there. But it's that exposure and just that ability to speak, and just be part of things like this that I really value. So sorry if I've just gone on.
Jackie, got a lot in the back there.
But sorry, yes, somebody else can do that.
I just wanted to thank you for your comments, and I was particularly interested to hear some criticism of some of what we read in the paper about Aboriginal leadership, because it becomes very confusing when we hear that Aboriginal people be okay once they kind of become white fellas. Once they do, they'll become healthy when they live like white fellas. When they got their businesses going and own their own homes, it's all going to solve the problem. And to me, I've never
and they all
felt...
become middle class.
Well, and to me, I've never felt that's just the same old assimilation policies being regurgitated. But I do understand that there's been a long history of Aboriginal survival, which has been the first thing the Howard government did was attack ATSIC and attacked Aboriginal people, the first thing when it came into power. And I suppose that within the Aboriginal community, people try to survive. They've learned that if you put your head up, you got shot, so you don't put your head up. And so my feeling is that often what we hear is that people who are trying to adapt, if you like, to the policies of the day to try to survive and to try to do something for their communities. But it is really, to me, it's really interesting to hear another perspective and to hear some criticism of that, because I've been confused by that. And I have worked in Aboriginal communities, and I worked in Tennant Creek for quite a long while, and I had a young woman who came down to the city for medical reasons to visit me, and she was very young, she was about 23, and she wanted to go to one place in Sydney, that was Redfern.
Yeah.
And I took her there, and she wanted to go on her own. She went down, she met people called her sister. She met with people, and she came back, and she said, it's the town camp. Her understanding of Redfern was it's the town camp of Sydney. And all around Australia there are town camps, be it what we heard at Griffith, Tennant Creek, there are 5 town camps, different communities. But it's the town camp of Sydney, and I think, for all of us, we've got to really value that, and we've got to maintain that camp for Aboriginal people and fight with them if they need help.
Yes.
But, this was just my experience of understanding. That's when I understood Redfern, was when she said, she wanted to go to the opera house. She did want to go to the zoo, she wanted to see animals, but she didn't like seeing them. She thought they were so sad, all these animals that she saw there, but she wanted to go to Redfern.
Yeah, I think Redfern, provides family, really. Provides family for black fellas coming through the city. Anyone can go there and fit in. And we're in, mainstream Australia. We just don't. We don't because we think different. Our patterns are different, and our genetic patterns are different. In terms of ATSIC, I'm a person mentored by a man by the name of Gary Foley. So I've never really been a great supporter of ATSIC, but now that it's removed, I can really see how it protected the people. Because now we have no peak voice, you know, and the voices that are up there are usually government appointed. And quite frankly, they are not people that engage with the community on a daily basis. They're people that live, you know, worlds away. They don't have the same struggles. They don't have the same responsibilities. And as I said before, we are people who culturally think in terms of mob. And usually they are people who have been, you know, I can't say ostracised, but they're people who have moved away from the community to make themselves better, to further assimilate. And, you know, I always pity a black man who thinks that or a black woman who thinks that their ideal goal is to become an imitation white person. I think it's worth, you know, pitying. I do. Anyone else? Run at me.
Involved with a discussion up in Wellington in the West about a site that's important to the Aboriginal community that's on the State Heritage Register, and there was some debate about that. And the local, the RSL, in fact, was fighting this. And they kept saying, well, you see, nobody's turning up to your meetings. You're having public consultation meetings. And we had to seek out some Aboriginal people to talk about why they thought it was important. And their response to me when I said, well, why didn't you come to the meeting, was, well, why should I? You're not going to listen to us anyway. And I thought, well, you know, I can understand that point of view. And if I was in that position, I'd go, I'm not going. But it's important to be talking. And so thank you very much.